let's get into right now Cooper Mays and what his absence may mean, because he's not playing against Virginia. He's not going to play against Austin P. I'm not sure he's going to play against Florida. How big of an absence is that, Caleb? Because if you don't play in those games, and Cooper is as in shape as anybody out there, if you don't play in those games, you're not going to be in game shape. So, what does it take you to get back in game shape, especially when they're not being pushed as hard in game week practice? This could be something that we talked about 2 weeks, is what Josh Heupel said. Well, that was last Thursday, and Coop's not back. This could be something that creates a half a season or a season long problem. Your thoughts on how significant that could be?
No, it's very significant. I don't care what they say in the press conferences. I don't believe that Ollie Lane is capable of stepping in at center and replacing what Cooper Mays brought to the table. I just don't. And I like Ollie Lane a lot. I think he's a fundamentals, intangibles, reliable, great guy, but he can't do what Cooper Mays can do. And also moving him over leaves a massive gap for Tennessee at left guard, because the thing about Ollie Lane is he was a utility player that you hoped you could just kind of plug in where you needed. You didn't want that to be at center. And so I think this is a big deal. I think the one thing that is positive out of this is that at least Tennessee, Dave, at least this injury happened. You hate to say this, but at least it happened early in fall camp. So Tennessee's had some time to work with the center quarterback exchange for 2-3 weeks now. So it's not like if Cooper Mays got hurt this week, it'd be a big issue, because you're going into the game week. You want to prepare for your opponents, and all of a sudden you got to make a change at center. That would have been an issue. They don't have to do that. So I think fall camp is, because as you know, you've covered practices. Fall camp is the time where you spend focusing solely on your team and where you can develop with chemistry. And
Chemistry is the word I was going to use. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. And so because this happened early, I think the one saving grace for Tennessee is that they were able to develop Ollie Lane more than when 2 years ago, when I think Cooper got hurt in the middle of the season, and that caused some real issues.
I completely agree. I think the offensive line is going to be okay as a whole, unless Ollie Lane just really drops the ball. The guy that dropped the ball from a development standpoint is Addison Nichols. I was told by multiple people his toughness, his tenaciousness is just not great. There have been times where he's gotten beat by very lower level players, talking about borderline walk-on type players, or guys that just should never be beating him, because physically he's not Darnell Wright, but he's probably the most physically gifted guy on the offensive line currently, and he hasn't come up. So he's the guy that's dropped the ball. But did Tennessee drop the ball? Because this is not a twisted ankle, and I think it's been widely reported that it's a hernia. I've known several people that have gone through hernias. Josh Ward can tell us more about hernias on Thursday. But that's something that seems like you could have addressed in June or July. I don't think you just crop up and have a hernia that puts you on the operating table. I believe that Josh Heupel has had one big misstep in his career at Tennessee. And this is an optimistic week. I'm not trying to bring anybody down, but can we all agree that playing Joe Milton ahead of Hendon Hooker was a mistake? You agree with that, right, Caleb?
A huge mistake.
Okay. If Cooper Mays is out an extended period of time, then that's got to be on Josh Heupel. This is not an injury where you turned an ankle. This was a hernia that cropped up over time, perhaps triple hernia, and you should have addressed it in July. Instead of him going to SEC Media Days and he didn't get to go because they wanted Joe Milton to go and they didn't want to put up a red flag by not sending the starting quarterback, they absolutely should have addressed this injury beforehand and had him more ready for, if not the beginning of fall camp, then throughout fall camp. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm not here to blast Josh Heupel, but this was a gamble to see if he'd be ready to go through the season. And like Caleb did over the weekend, the Vols crapped out.
Do you think it was out of desperation because he knew how limited he was at center? Do you think he was just hoping, please, let's not be a hernia, and maybe telling himself that it's not one because of how devastating it would be for Tennessee? If it was like, do you think he would have had the same philosophy with, for instance, Squirrel White, knowing that Dante Thornton is behind him?
Would he have hit it? Is that what you're asking me? Would it? Because some athletes do. I don't
No,
think
would Josh Heupel have addressed it? Do you think Josh Heupel would have addressed it more thoroughly in June with somebody like Squirrel White because he knows he has more depth at receiver, as opposed to Cooper Mays, where he was a little desperate to make sure Cooper Mays could play?
perhaps, or he was pushed to continue practicing and playing in the summer when he thought something was wrong, and they told him everything would be fine. Here's the thing for Cooper Mays as a backstory. For those of you that don't know, I worked with his dad, Kevin Mays. That's how old I am. So Kevin Mays, I can't remember the year, I believe it was 92, is wrapping up a pro day drill. And according to all scouts of reporters I've talked to that covered that pro day, he was going to be a first round pick. He was projected to the Dallas Cowboys, as a matter of fact. And man, wouldn't it be awesome to be a part of that group they had in the early 90s that won 3 Super Bowls? He would have been in the middle of that. So that was the plan. And a guy comes up to him and says, "Hey, can you help me run through this drill?" A younger guy. Well, he then suffered one of those bad injuries, like the knee injury that will tear an artery. So you lose part of the muscle mass in your leg. This is not an ACL that you can repair nowadays and put together. And back then, ACLs were never the same. Ask Chuck Webb. But that was an injury that completely erased his career. The moment it happened, he had no pro career. So Cooper Mays is going to go in this, and he is not going to go in to any game, which he said on the Vol report brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, which he said this. I know I'm going to be 100% when I go back. Because remember his sophomore year, what happened? It was one injury after another. This now gives him the label heading into the NFL, even if he's healthy for Florida, and I don't believe he will be. This gives him the label of injury prone. Having another season marred by injury does that. There's no two ways about it. And Tennessee, I believe, wanted him to play. I thought he could get through it. I also think that Cooper Mays wanted to play because he is a combatant. He's a competitor. He's a guy you want on your side. And I think that he probably wanted to get out there as much as anybody. But at the end, whether it's Coop or it's the medical staff or it's Josh Heupel's decision, given a 50-50 on an injury case, which does happen, this didn't work out. This did not work out. He's not ready for the opener, and it certainly didn't work out if he's not ready by Florida. But I was told by somebody within Tennessee's program, few weeks. Few weeks. That doesn't sound like 2. That sounds more like 4 to 6 to me. The person didn't want to be specific, but said few weeks. Almost to the point where he wasn't dismissing Cooper, but he was dismissing Cooper for the near future. So this is a team that's thinking about life without Cooper. I'm guessing not guessing, I'm predicting, I'm giving you inside knowledge, that's at least a month. So let's say they get through September unscathed. So then what does October bring you? Caleb, I'm sure you have the schedule in front of me and know it by heart.
I don't know if I know it by heart, but isn't it Texas A&M, South Carolina, Alabama? Is it Kentucky? I mean, just the gauntlet. The gauntlet is October, as it always is with Tennessee.
Well, that's not when you want to be getting back to game shape. That's not. And then you have to make decisions over whether or not to put him out there. Now,
you're wrong. I'm sorry. Texas A&M is when you want to be getting back to game shape. I mean, I'm sorry. They're going to be so bad this year that you're going to want to get back into game shape against Texas A&M because they're just going to – guys, I'm telling you, Texas A&M is going to be awful. It is the perfect type of game to test some things out because they are going to be a bad team this year.
Well, I mean, they still got talent on the defensive line. So, we could debate whether or not they're going to be good. You don't want to bring a guy back against an SEC opponent. You would agree that, right? I mean, you want to bring a guy back against an Austin Peay, give him a few snaps, see how things go. You do not want to bring a guy back against an SEC opponent. No matter, you and I may feel different about A&M, but I mean, they still have
I'm going
Walter
to push back
Nolan.
on that, and here's why. The big reason why is I know this with defensive line more than, and you do too, it applies here more than any other position. Effectiveness on the defensive line is so much just about how excited you are to play. And the reason I think Texas A&M is going to come apart is because they're going to be split down the middle, and then they're going to quit on the season. Well, if any unit quits on the season before any other unit, it's the defensive line. And I just think there's going to be a complete, genuine lack of interest by the time they're playing Tennessee this year. And so that's where I'm at.
Well, if you're right, that'll help Coop. Right now, if I'm Josh Heupel, I don't want him coming back against an SEC opponent. That's not what I'm shooting for. So, coming up on the program, we are going to discuss a number of things, and that is the main goal for the Vols against Virginia. And also, should the Vols consider more neutral sites game in Nashville for recruiting purposes? I'm going to say heck no, and I'm going to throw an idea out there that Caleb thinks it's crazy, and that's fine because I still love him. But we're going to get that out there as well, as the Vols will face Virginia noon in, what do they call it now? What's the corporate sponsor?
Oh, I don't even know the name of this game.
No, the name of the stadium now. I don't even know the name of the stadium.
Oh, it's Nissan Stadium.
Yeah, Nissan Stadium. So with all that being said about Coop, I believe that Tennessee's offensive line will still be a positive addition to this team. So I think you have positive addition. I think you have positives on a football team and you have negatives. You have positives that are going to win you more games than they're going to lose. They're going to contribute to more victories than losses. And you have guys that won't. So I still like Tennessee's offensive line better than their secondary. So I'm not saying that it's time to panic and run around the streets and dogs sleeping with cats and cats sleeping with dogs and it's total mayhem, airplane reference. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying and telling you is that this is a very significant loss. But I think Tennessee's offensive line will actually be fine.